My wedding day was supposed to be the beginning of happiness. Amid the glittering lights and hollow smiles, my frail, aging mother stepped forward with trembling hands. In her grasp was a small gift, wrapped in simple brown paper, humble, yet filled with sincerity. I hadn't even said a word when my bride insulted her, shouted, and threw the gift straight into my mother's face, mocking her simple life. In that moment, I knew there are wounds you cannot see and regrets that always come too late. Before we get into the story, don't forget to say hi in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. And make sure to hit the subscribe button on Stories with Meaning channel so you won't miss our next story. My name is Adrian. That day, I stood in the middle of a grand wedding hall in Chicago, filled with shimmering chandeliers and the scent of fresh roses. The black suit I wore felt unbearably heavy, not because of the fabric, but because of the weight pressing against my chest since morning. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. In the front rows, my bride's family sat elegantly dressed. The Whitmore family, wealthy, polished, and impossible to ignore, sparkled with expensive jewelry and designer outfits. Their laughter rang loudly, full of confidence, as if the world had always belonged to them. But my eyes searched for only one person, my mother, Eleanor. She sat slightly to the side in a simple wheelchair. Her body looked smaller than I remembered, worn down by age. Her hands were thin, her skin wrinkled, but her face remained calm. She wore an old cream dress, neatly pressed, spotless. No gold, no shine, just the quiet simplicity she had carried her entire life. I took a deep breath. Since my father passed away, she had been my only home. She raised me with hard work, endless prayers, and patience that never seemed to run out. She never complained, even when life gave us nothing. The music shifted. The ceremony was about to begin. Then she raised her hand slightly, signaling me. I walked over. On her lap was a small gift, wrapped in plain brown paper. No ribbon, no fancy card. "Adrian," she said softly, "before the ceremony, I want to give you this." I smiled and knelt beside her. "Thank you, Mom. Your presence is already more than enough." She shook her head gently. "This is a token of my love for you and your wife." My chest warmed. I stood and turned toward my bride. Her name was Victoria Whitmore. She stood elegantly beside me, her white gown shimmering under the lights, her makeup flawless. She smiled, but it wasn't a comforting smile. There was something in her eyes, something I had never fully understood. I handed her the gift. "This is from my mom." She didn't look at it. She glanced at it. Her smile thinned. "That's it?" she said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. I froze. "Victoria?" I whispered, trying to calm her. But she picked up the gift with just 2 fingers, as if it were dirty. She let out a small laugh. A gift like this at a wedding like this? Some guests began to turn their heads. My mother watched from her wheelchair, confused. Her hands tightened together. Everything happened too fast. Victoria swung her arm. The gift flew and hit my mother's face. The sound wasn't loud, but inside me it was thunder. "This is embarrassing," Victoria snapped. "People with this kind of lifestyle should know their place. This is a high-class event, not some backyard gathering." My mother stayed silent. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She just lowered her head, holding in something far heavier than shame. Behind Victoria, I heard laughter. Her mother, Mrs. Whitmore, covered her mouth, but her amusement was obvious. Her stepfather, Mr. Collins, shook his head with a mocking smile. "Don't take it personally," he said casually. "She's just simple." Those words cut deeper than anything Victoria had said. I looked at my mother. She lifted her face and gave me a small smile, the same smile she had always used to comfort me, even when she was the one hurting. And something inside me broke. I stood tall. The music faded. The lights dimmed in my vision. All eyes turned toward me. My fists clenched. This was no longer about a wedding. This was about dignity, about my mother, about a line that should never be crossed. I took a deep breath. Silence filled the room. No one noticed that the small gift lying on the floor held something that would change everything. I stepped forward. The marble floor felt cold beneath my shoes. My mind was suddenly clear, like a curtain had been lifted. I looked at Victoria. She still wore that faint smile, the same smile that had just wounded my mother. Behind her, her parents stood casually, as if this were nothing more than entertainment before the ceremony. Then I turned to my mother. She was still smiling, but her eyes were wet. Her hands clutched the edge of her dress, trying to stop the trembling. That smile wasn't strength, it was exhaustion. My chest shook. "I'm sorry," I said softly. I wasn't sure to whom. Then my voice hardened. "Everyone, listen." The whispers stopped. The room fell completely silent. I looked at the officiant seated at the front. This wedding cannot continue. Gasps filled the room. Some guests half stood, others covered their mouths. Victoria narrowed her eyes. "You're joking, right? Adrian, this is our wedding day." I shook my head. "If you can't respect my mother, you don't deserve to be my wife." Everything collapsed. Victoria stepped closer, her voice rising. "You're going to humiliate me over a small gift?" "It's not the gift," I said firmly. "It's how you treated the woman who gave me life." Mrs. Whitmore stepped forward. "This is outrageous. This wedding cost a fortune." I looked straight at her. Nothing is more valuable than a mother's dignity. Then I heard a soft voice. "Adrian!" My mother. I immediately knelt beside her wheelchair.
"Mom, I'm fine, my son," she said gently. "I don't want you to end up in conflict." I shook my head. "You did nothing wrong." I stood up again and faced everyone. "With this, I am canceling this wedding today." The words fell like a judge's hammer. Victoria froze, her face turning pale. "He'll regret this," she whispered, her voice trembling between anger and panic. "You have no idea what you're throwing away." I didn't respond. On the floor, the small gift still lay there. The wrapping paper was slightly crumpled, one corner bent. I picked it up and placed it back into my mother's hands. "Forgive me, my son," she said with a soft smile. "I just wanted to give you the best." My throat tightened. "You've already given me everything." She looked at the gift for a long moment, as if weighing something deep within her heart. Then, slowly, she began unfolding the wrapping paper. I didn't know what was inside, but from that second on, a strange feeling crept into my chest, like an old secret finally preparing to reveal itself. While everyone was still caught in the chaos of the canceled wedding, none of them realized what was inside that small package wasn't just a gift. It was something that would change the course of our lives forever. My mother opened the wrapping carefully, as if what lay inside was something fragile that could break with the slightest force. Her fingers moved slowly, trembling slightly, yet her face remained calm. A faint smile still lingered on her lips, the same smile she used when I was a child, comforting me after I came home with scraped knees. The noise in the hall gradually faded. The guests who had been whispering fell silent. It was as if the entire room held its breath without knowing why. The final layer of paper came off. Inside, there was no jewelry, no cash, no luxury item like the ones the Whitmore family valued so highly. Just a few neatly folded sheets of paper. Victoria scoffed. "Just papers?" she said, her voice shaking. "You see this, Adrian? This is what you're defending." My mother didn't respond. She unfolded the first sheet, then the second. Her eyes scanned the lines of formal writing. Suddenly, the smile on her face disappeared, replaced by an expression I couldn't read. Not shock, not fear, but a deep, quiet calm. She took a slow breath and looked up. "Adrian," she said softly. I stepped closer. "Yes, Mom?" She handed me one of the sheets. "Please, read it." My hand took the paper. My heart began to race. My eyes moved across the formal text. The longer I read, the harder it became to breathe. Asset transfer documents, company ownership records, shareholding agreements, and then the total value. My head rang. $2 million. My hands trembled. I looked at my mother, searching for an explanation. She nodded gently. "It's your grandfather's inheritance. I kept it safe last year. Everything is under my name." Gasps erupted throughout the hall. Some guests stood up. Others covered their mouths. A few staggered backward. Victoria turned pale. "What does this mean? Mrs. Eleanor, this is a joke, right?" My mother turned to her. Her gaze was still gentle, but no longer warm. "I never joke about responsibility." Mrs. Whitmore suddenly screamed. "That's impossible!" She broke into hysterical tears, her body weakening as Mr. Collins held her. "That gift, it was supposed to be for Victoria, for this wedding." Victoria rushed forward, nearly dropping to her knees. "Forgive me, Mrs. Eleanor. I was just joking. I didn't know the gift was this." Her cries shattered into desperation. Her family joined in, their voices overlapping in a wave of panic that came far too late. I stood there frozen. My mind was overwhelmed, but my heart felt cold. My mother looked at them one by one, then back at me. "Originally, this inheritance was meant for you and your wife as a foundation for your future." Victoria looked up instantly, her eyes shining through tears. "I'll be a good wife. I'll change, I promise." My mother paused. Then, slowly, she took the documents back from my hands. She folded them neatly, just like before. "But today, I learned something." Silence fell again. Everyone waited. I looked at my mother's face, and for the first time in my life, I saw a firmness that had always been hidden behind her gentleness, a firmness that would decide everything. I pushed my mother's wheelchair slowly towards the exit. My hands felt warm, gripping the cold metal handles. Behind us, a few people from my side followed in silence. Their faces were tense, but their steps were steady. No one looked back. The grand hall had turned into a long, hollow corridor. The music had stopped. The lights were still on, but their glow felt ajoned, like something out of place. I could feel the weight of countless stares on my back, heavy, soaked in regret that wasn't mine. Then hurried footsteps echoed behind us. "Adrian!" Victoria shouted, her voice hoarse. She ran towards us, her gown dragging across the floor, tears streaming down her face, her makeup ruined. Mrs. Whitmore and Mr. Collins followed, pale and breathless. "Please stop. We can talk about this. Don't leave like this." I didn't stop. Victoria grabbed my arm. "Please," she cried. "I was wrong. I was truly wrong." I paused, not because of her, but because my mother raised her hand slightly. "I'm tired. Let's just go home." I nodded. "Yes, Mom." I continued walking. Victoria cried even harder. "You can't just leave like this. Everything has already happened." I turned and looked at her one last time. "What happened was your choice." Mr. Collins stepped in front of me. "You think your life will be better without us?" His voice trembled, no longer arrogant. I looked at him calmly. "My life has been better since I learned to respect my mother." A few people from my side stepped forward, creating distance.
No pushing, no shouting, just a firm boundary that couldn't be crossed. The doors opened. The outside air welcomed us, colder, but far more honest. I pushed my mother's wheelchair down the path towards our car.
The evening sky hung in a dull gray, as if holding back rain that had yet to fall. Behind us, Victoria's sobs turned into desperate screams. Mrs. Whitmore collapsed onto the floor, striking her own thigh as she cried out. Her voice cracked under the weight of panic. Mr. Collins stood frozen, like a statue that had lost its meaning. None of them could stop us. I helped my mother into the car. She looked at me and smiled. This time, her smile wasn't meant to comfort others. It was meant to strengthen herself. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. I shook my head. "I'm going home with you. That's enough." The car began to move, slowly leaving the building behind. Through the rear window, I watched the grand doors grow smaller. Their cries and shouts blurred into nothing. But deep inside, I knew this return wasn't the end. The inheritance documents were still in my mother's hands. The real decision had not yet been spoken. And in the quiet of that journey home, I felt one thing with certainty. Today wasn't just a canceled wedding. A new future had quietly begun to open itself. That night, my mother and I arrived home without saying much. Our small house felt quieter than usual, but also more honest. I helped her into her room, adjusted her pillow, and turned off the light. Before I left, she gently held my hand. "Get some rest," she said softly. "Tomorrow will be long." I nodded, even though I knew sleep wouldn't come easily. Elsewhere, far from our home, a storm was breaking. I didn't need to see it to know. I could feel it, ever since I walked out of that wedding hall. The Whitmore family would not stay silent. They were people who were used to winning, and that kind of defeat was too heavy to accept calmly. Inside their luxurious home, voices clashed loudly. "I told you not to insult someone's mother," Mr. Collins shouted. "You always look down on anyone who isn't on our level." Victoria cried hysterically. "You laughed too," she snapped back. "All of you did. You all humiliated her." Mrs. Whitmore slammed her hand on the table. "If only she hadn't come with that cheap gift." "It wasn't cheap," Mr. Collins cut in sharply. "That was $2 million." The sentence hung in the air, heavy like a hammer crushing their awareness. Victoria's cries turned into long, broken sobs. There was no more anger, only regret, arriving far too late. They didn't sleep that night. Apologies were repeated over and over, but had nowhere to land, until morning came with pale light, and a decision was made. They would come to my house. That morning, I had just poured tea for my mother when I heard a car stop outside. I glanced through the window. My heartbeat quickened. Victoria stepped out first, her face pale, her eyes swollen. Mrs. Whitmore and Mr. Collins followed behind her. Their steps were hesitant, no longer proud like the day before. They stood at the gate for a few seconds, as if gathering courage from the last pieces of their shattered pride. Then came the knock. I opened the door. "Adrian," Mrs. Whitmore said, her voice breaking, "we came to apologize." I didn't answer immediately. I checked on my mother. She was still resting, then returned to face them. "Let's talk outside," I said calmly. Victoria lowered her head. "I never meant to hurt your mother," she said, her voice trembling. Mr. Collins added, "We were wrong, all of us. We were blinded by arrogance." I listened, but there was no movement in my chest. Everything felt too late, like rain falling after a house had already burned down. "What do you expect from coming here?" I finally asked. Mrs. Whitmore looked at me with hope. "We want to fix everything." I nodded slowly. "There are things that can't be fixed with apologies." Victoria sobbed harder, her knees nearly giving out. "Please," she begged, "I'll change, I really will."
I looked at them. For the first time, they seemed small, fragile, afraid. But behind me, inside my home, was a mother who still held the true decision in silence. And I knew this apology was not the end of anything. It was only the beginning of something far more decisive. I asked them to wait on the porch. The morning air was damp, the scent of wet earth lingering in the silence. Victoria sat with her head down, her hands tightly clasped. Mrs. Whitmore stood restlessly. Mr. Collins stared at the yard, as if searching for answers among the flower pots. I went inside to my mother. She was already awake, sitting in her wheelchair near the window. Her face was calm, like a lake untouched by wind. "They're here," I said softly. She nodded. "I know." I hesitated. "They came to apologize." She gave a faint smile. "Invite them in." I opened the door. Victoria looked up, startled. Her eyes widened as she quickly stood. Mrs. Whitmore and Mr. Collins followed cautiously. They stepped inside like people walking on unfamiliar ground. Victoria immediately dropped to her knees. "Mrs. Eleanor, I was wrong. I'm so sorry." Mrs. Whitmore lowered her head. "We were all wrong. We lost ourselves." Mr. Collins took a deep breath. "Our arrogance blinded us." I listened, but there was no movement in my chest. Everything felt too late, like rain falling after a house had already burned down. "What do you expect from coming here?" I finally asked. Mrs. Whitmore looked at me with hope. "We want to fix everything." I nodded slowly. "There are things that can't be fixed with apologies." Victoria sobbed harder, her knees nearly giving out. "Please," she begged. "I'll change. I really will." I looked at them. For the first time, they seemed small, fragile, afraid. But behind me, inside my home, was a mother who still held the true decision in silence. And I knew this apology was not the end of anything. It was only the beginning of something far more decisive. I asked them to wait on the porch. The morning air was damp, the scent of wet earth lingering in the silence. Victoria sat with her head down, her hands tightly clasped. Mrs. Whitmore stood restlessly. Mr. Collins stared at the yard, as if searching for answers among the flower pots. I went inside to my mother. She was already awake, sitting in her wheelchair near the window. Her face was calm, like a lake untouched by wind. "They're here," I said softly. She nodded. "I know." I hesitated. "They came to apologize." She gave a faint smile. "Invite them in." I opened the door. Victoria looked up, startled. Her eyes widened as she quickly stood. Mrs. Whitmore and Mr. Collins followed cautiously. They stepped inside like people walking on unfamiliar ground. Victoria immediately dropped to her knees. "Mrs. Eleanor, I was wrong. I'm so sorry." Mrs. Whitmore lowered her head. "We were all wrong. We lost ourselves." Mr. Collins took a deep breath. "Our arrogance blinded us." I listened, but there was no movement in my chest. Everything felt too late, like rain falling after a house had already burned down. "What do you expect from coming here?" I finally asked. Mrs. Whitmore looked at me with hope. "We want to fix everything." I nodded slowly. "There are things that can't be fixed with apologies." Victoria sobbed harder, her knees nearly giving out. "Please," she begged. "I'll change. I really will." I looked at them. For the first time, they seemed small, fragile, afraid. But behind me, inside my home, was a mother who still held the true decision in silence. And I knew this apology was not the end of anything. It was only the beginning of something far more decisive. I asked them to wait on the porch. The morning air was damp, the scent of wet earth lingering in the silence. Victoria sat with her head down, her hands tightly clasped. Mrs. Whitmore stood restlessly. Mr. Collins stared at the yard, as if searching for answers among the flower pots. I went inside to my mother. She was already awake, sitting in her wheelchair near the window. Her face was calm, like a lake untouched by wind. "They're here," I said softly. She nodded. "I know." I hesitated. "They came to apologize." She gave a faint smile. "Invite them in." I opened the door. Victoria looked up, startled. Her eyes widened as she quickly stood. Mrs. Whitmore and Mr. Collins followed cautiously. They stepped inside like people walking on unfamiliar ground. Victoria immediately dropped to her knees. "Mrs. Eleanor, I was wrong. I'm so sorry." Mrs. Whitmore lowered her head. "We were all wrong. We lost ourselves." Mr. Collins took a deep breath. "Our arrogance blinded us." I listened, but there was no movement in my chest. Everything felt too late, like rain falling after a house had already burned down. "What do you expect from coming here?" I finally asked. Mrs. Whitmore looked at me with hope. "We want to fix everything." I nodded slowly. "There are things that can't be fixed with apologies." Victoria sobbed harder.
Let's end this here. They stood up slowly. There were no more pleas, no more promises. Only heavy steps and faces learning how to accept. When the door closed, the house fell silent again. I sat beside my mother. "You're strong," she said softly. "I learned from you," I replied. On the small table, the folder containing the inheritance documents lay neatly in place, untouched since yesterday. The decision had not yet been announced. The path forward had not yet been chosen. Outside, the sun slowly rose, and inside this simple house, an ending was quietly being prepared. 2 months passed like calm water flowing, quiet on the surface, yet reshaping everything beneath. Our home returned to its simple rhythm. Mornings with warm tea for my mother, afternoons filled with the work I carefully began to rebuild, evenings with prayers no longer shaken by turmoil. My mother and I started working together, not with grand ambition, but with small, steady steps. The documents were finally reopened, one by one, read in silence. There was no celebration, only the awareness that responsibility must be honored. In the middle of that calm, someone entered my life, quietly. Her name was Helena. I didn't meet her at a party, not through wealth or status. She came through honest conversations and patient time. Her smile didn't demand attention, it brought peace. Her gaze was gentle, her words were soft, and the way she treated my mother made me silently grateful. Every time she visited, Helena would lower her head respectfully. "Have you eaten, Mrs. Eleanor?" she would ask gently. She never sat before my mother invited her. Her hands were quick to help, without ever acting superior. My mother liked her, not because of appearance, but because of her character. One afternoon, as light rain fell softly, my mother looked at me for a long time. "If your heart is certain, don't delay," she said. I nodded. The invitations were printed simply. No luxury, no excess, just clear names, Adrian and Helena. I wrote one address myself, the Whitmore residence. The courier left in the morning. I didn't go. Sometimes distance speaks more honestly than presence. At that grand house, a quiet morning turned into chaos. Victoria opened the white envelope with trembling hands. She read it once, then again. Her face turned pale, then flushed red. "No!" she screamed. "No, this can't be!" Her voice shattered the living room. The envelope slipped from her hand. Mrs. Whitmore rushed out of her room. Mr. Collins followed. "What happened?" she asked in panic. Victoria pointed at the invitation on the floor. "He's marrying someone else!" The name was clear. Helena.
Victoria covered her face. Her cries exploded, no longer regret, but a loss that could not be undone. Meanwhile, in our home, Helena sat beside my mother. She poured tea and handed the cup with both hands. "Thank you, dear," my mother said. Helena smiled softly. "Thank you for accepting me." I looked at them, and for the first time in my life, I felt a peace that needed no conditions. The invitations had been sent. The past had been given its place. But I knew this story wasn't over yet, because sometimes true peace is tested one last time before it fully arrives. My wedding day with Helena came quietly. No grand hall, no excessive celebration. Our yard was arranged neatly, simple chairs, white flowers flowing gently in every corner. The air felt light, as if it breathed along with us. I stood beside Helena. Her dress was simple, soft in color, not striking, yet making her look effortlessly graceful. Her eyes were calm, her smile unhurried. My mother sat in the front row. Her face glowed, her eyes filled with tears since earlier. Among the arriving guests, I saw 3 familiar figures: Victoria, Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Collins. Their steps were hesitant as they entered. Victoria wore a simple dress, far from the image she once took pride in. Her eyes locked onto me immediately. As I stepped forward to greet guests, she approached quickly. Her hand reached out, her face filled with tangled emotions. "Adrian," she whispered, trying to embrace me. I gently but firmly stopped her arm. "That's enough," I said quietly. She froze. Her hand fell slowly. Her eyes filled with tears, then shifted towards Helena. And in that moment, I saw something collapse within her. Helena lowered her head respectfully. "Thank you for coming," she said gently. There was no triumph in her voice, no arrogance, only kindness. And somehow, that kindness cut deeper than anything else. The ceremony continued peacefully. Prayers flowed calmly. Guests listened with softened expressions. Then, suddenly, my mother coughed hard. Her face turned pale, her hand rising to her chest. The atmosphere tightened. Before I could move, Helena was already there. She grabbed a glass of water and knelt beside my mother. "Slowly, Mrs. Eleanor," she said softly. She supported her mother's back with one hand, gently rubbing it in steady rhythm. Patient, careful. My mother took a breath. Her coughing eased. Her face slowly returned to calm. "Thank you, dear," she whispered. Helena smiled. "You're welcome." In the corner, I saw Mrs. Whitmore turn her face away. Her eyes were wet, not from emotion, but from a jealousy she couldn't hide. Mr. Collins stood stiffly, his jaw tight. Soft whispers began among the guests. "She's so gentle. Her care is sincere. No wonder his mother loves her." Another voice followed. "They're perfect together, Adrian and Helena." I looked at Helena. She looked back at me, as if hearing the same thing. We said nothing. We simply smiled. Not the smile of victory, but the smile of 2 people who had finally arrived at the right place. In the distance, Victoria stood frozen, her fists clenched, her chest rising and falling. She saw everything. The kindness she never understood before now stood fully in front of her. And in the middle of that peaceful moment, I knew there was one final chapter still waiting. A closing chapter that would bind every wound, every lesson, and every choice into one.